Thanks. And tough act to follow. So exactly 6 years ago, I moved to California. And I was moving here from New York, which if you've spent a winter in New York, you know it can be pretty dreary and muddy and kind of gross. And it's really the best time of year to move. I already love spring. And it was just such a revelation to move to California. On my walk to the grocery store, there ended up being a jasmine bush. I had no idea what jasmine was, but I caught a whiff, and I was obsessed. I was so excited to be here. And I was excited, of course, for the plant life here, but also for this job that I was taking at Stanford. So it was for this Computational Policy Lab. The idea was for us to use things like technology and data science to support public policy, and particularly with a focus on criminal justice reform. And I had spent 3 years as the director of analytics for the New York Police Department, where I realized that working for one agency has a lot of constraints, in the fact that you're constrained by the agency that you work in, your advisor, or your supervisors. And so I was really excited about working from the university context, where you could just imagine partnering with many different agencies and thinking about many different things that we could change across the criminal justice system. So I was super excited. I was really hoping to have change, or to make an impact in the real world. And my first year here was a bit of a revelation on really how hard that is for that to happen. We worked on a project where we were hoping to reduce time in jail for folks whose cases would eventually be dismissed. We worked with prosecutors who make this decision about dismissing or charging a case. We spent months on this thing. We come up with a sort of proposal for how prosecutors could reduce time in jail substantially for these folks. And we were really excited about it. It seemed like totally possible to do. We had some data that we could show these really big potential impacts on jail time. And then we talked to some prosecutors or district attorneys, and they said, this is a nice idea, but we're not going to do it. We have sort of other considerations at play. And so after all this time spending really studying this idea, the most concrete outcome was a trip to Hawaii that I got to present this paper at a conference. And I'm not complaining about going to Waikiki, and getting a day on the beach, but it really wasn't the kind of impact I was hoping for. So that all changed a year into my job. I was riding Caltrain down to work, and I got an email from one of our partners at the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. And they were pitching a project to us out of the blue called race blind charging. So the idea behind this project was that we would automatically redact race-related information from police reports that the prosecutors receive using an algorithm to do this kind of redaction. And then prosecutors would review a race-blinded version of this report so they could make a race-blind decision about who to charge or dismiss a crime against. And this had never been done before. The main challenge was finding a way to do this actually automatically. And so that's why they came to us. We had already established this reputation of being able to do this kind of technology and data science work, so it was a great fit, and we were super excited about it, so we said yes. And within a couple weeks, I had put on my best suit. I have 2 suits, but I put on my best one. And I was standing in the district attorney's office in their library. We had converted it into a temporary press room, and we were standing in front of television cameras. And I'm really not a fan of public speaking. I don't know why I'm here tonight, but I was also in front of the press there, and it was pretty nerve-wracking. I was standing next to the district attorney who had done this probably hundreds of times, and this was no big deal for him, but it went well, and we got a ton of attention. People were really excited about this idea, and this was really a really thrilling moment, professionally for me, was to be able to think about the sort of impact we could have. But one thing I learned very quickly about these kinds of projects is they're a bit like roller coasters. And sometimes you have these peaks where you're super excited about the work that you're doing, and other times you're at these valleys where it's just aggravating and you're tearing your hair out. And so one recommendation I have is don't announce to the press before you actually do the thing. That can cause a lot of stress. So that summer, after we had already announced this thing, we then got to work actually building the algorithm. And it's pretty complicated. Of course, we wanted to redact things like explicit mentions of race, but even doing so was pretty complicated because even the word black, for example, sometimes it's used in a racial context, sometimes it's not, and we wanted to be very careful that we only redacted it when it was used in a racial context. And then we also wanted to redact things like people's names, and sometimes people's names can be misspelled. We also wanted to spot things like addresses and neighborhood names and all this stuff, and it was essentially a big game of whack-a-mole where we'd fix one problem over here, and then that would create other problems over here. And we were essentially sitting at our desks and really just, I'm not sure if we would be able to make this thing happen. But by the end of summer 2019, we actually got something working that was pretty reliable, and we started this pilot at the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. So again, a bit of a roller coaster. Now this thing was in practice. People were using it to inform their own decision making. Another really high moment for me in my career. And we'd planned on doing this thing for a year to evaluate its impacts on charging decisions. But if you're like me, you think, oh, a year from August 2019, that means that probably something happened with the pandemic. And indeed, our project was cut short in March 2020. The DA's attention shifted to trying to release people from jail who had high risk of serious illness from COVID. And so that could have been the end of the project. I think that would have been a really remarkable, experience for me on its own. But another analogy I just thought about before we came in here is that these projects can also be like the Richard Serra sculpture outside, which is that you have these kind of twists and turns on the project and you don't know really what's coming around the corner when you're sort of in the middle of these projects. And that's certainly the case with this project too. So around the same time that this thing got canceled, we got another query from a district attorney. This one was from a place, no joke, called Yolo County. It's just outside of Sacramento, also in California. Their name predates the modern use of the acronym, but I've actually heard them say on presentations that they're the You Only Live Once County, which I think is not a really place. I don't know if I'd say that or if I'd want to live there, but that's what they say. And really, I think in some ways that sort of also describes our thought for partnering with them. They were a lot smaller, so it wasn't a good place to run this kind of evaluation that we wanted to do. But it was still a challenge for us to see if we had just gotten lucky in San Francisco and it was just possible here, if we could get this thing working elsewhere. So again, it was this sort of, months of aggravating work, playing whack-a-mole, trying to get this thing working in Yolo County. And finally, at the end of 2021, we got this thing working there too. So that could have been the end of the story. And again, this would have been a really sort of wonderful thing to have this work that we had done deployed in 2 places across California. But that wasn't really the end of it, because the district attorney there contacted his state legislator. He was so excited about this idea that he got his own legislator to write a bill mandating that all prosecutors across the state of California use race-blind charging by the beginning of 2025. And if you do this work, sometimes your work gets written into a bill and you're like, oh, that's kind of fun, but it's never going to get passed, right? Kind of a novelty idea. And that's certainly what we thought when we first heard about this bill. But by the end of 2022, it had passed unanimously in both houses, and Governor Newsom signed it into law. Yeah. Thank you. So at this point, it's actually sort of a double moment for me, because one, I think just like you, I was really excited to see this thing happen. It was pretty crazy to see my work, become state law. If you look at the bill, it describes exactly the sort of thing that we did in San Francisco and Yolo County. But at the same time, I felt a real sense of responsibility to make sure this thing was done right and to make sure that we could actually evaluate its impacts on charging decisions, these really high-stakes decisions that prosecutors make that can have profound impacts on people's lives. And so my sort of life now is in a bit of this trough on the roller coaster, trying to help prosecutors across the state meet this mandate that's coming really quickly by the beginning of next year. And in fact, tomorrow morning, actually, I'm going to a group of prosecutors to talk to them about the work that we're doing and to try and invite them into our research project. A lot of them are really quite scared about joining this kind of research and participating in this kind of research. But just imagine a sort of room like this, but filled with prosecutors in suits who are very grumpy about this mandate, and you'll get a sense of what I'm in for tomorrow. So wish me luck. Thank you.